I'm going to order this public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Committee of the Whole and Chair of the Council. Today is Wednesday, July 6, 2022. The time is 10:02 in the morning. I apologize for starting late. I had some transportation issues getting in. And the subject of this hearing is something like 8 bills that have been introduced by different council members concerning the naming of public park or of streets or of alleys. Some of those namings are official and most of them are symbolic, what's being proposed. More specifically, this hearing is concerning Bill 24-417, entitled the Teresa Howe Jones Way Designation Act of 2021. This legislation would symbolically designate the 4020 block, I guess that's the 4,000 block of First Place Southwest, which is in Ward 8, as Teresa Howe Jones Way. This legislation was introduced by Councilmember Trayon White and co-introduced by several other council members on October 1st last year. The second bill is 24-422, entitled the Torres Strait Way Designation Act of 2021. This legislation would symbolically designate the alleyway between 1601 Massachusetts Avenue Northwest and 1603 Massachusetts Avenue Northwest in Ward 2 as Torres Strait Way. This alley runs between the Australian Embassy and part of the Philippines Embassy on Massachusetts Avenue. This legislation was introduced by Councilmember Pinto on October 4th last year. The third bill is Bill 24-427, River Rock Court Designation Act of 2021. This legislation would officially name the alley within Square 969 as River Rock Court. Square 969 is bounded by 10th and 11th Streets Southeast and Independence and I believe it's Independence and C Street Southeast. And that would be an official name. That legislation was introduced by Councilmember Allen on October 4th last year. The next bill is 24-436, entitled the Kenilworth Courts Street Designation Act of 2021. This legislation would designate or name 2 streets within Square 5116. One street to be named Denise Stanley Street and the other street to be named Amin Muslim Street. Square 5116, that's 5,116. Is in Ward 7 and is between Kenilworth Avenue Northeast. It's in the area of Kenilworth. Give me a second here. Between Kenilworth Avenue and 45th Street Northeast, and between Coral Street and Douglas Street Northeast. This legislation was introduced by Councilmember Vincent C. Gray on October 6th of last year. The next, and it would be an official naming. The next bill is 24-528, entitled the W. Cardell Shelton Way Designation Act of 2021. This legislation would symbolically designate the 100 block of Upsall Street Southeast in Ward 8 as W. Cardell Shelton Way. The next bill is Bill 24-722, entitled the Swampoodle Terrace Designation Act of 2022. This legislation was introduced by Councilmember Charles Allen on March 21st of this year. It would officially designate the park in square 748 as Swampoodle Terrace. The park, I think I said, is in square 748, bounded by L and M Streets Northeast and 2nd and 3rd Streets Northeast in Ward 6. The previous bill introduced, the W. Cardell Shelton, was introduced by Councilmember Tran White and co-introduced by several other council members on December 1st of last year. The next bill is Bill 24-736. It's a symbolic street designation. It's entitled the Wilhelmina and Calvin Rolark Way Symbolic Street Designation Act of 2022. This bill would symbolically designate the 500 block of Foxhall Place Southeast in Ward 8 as Wilhelmina and Calvin Rolark Way Southeast. Calvin Rolark, I believe, was the founder and publisher of the Washington Informer, and Wilhelmina Rolark was the council member, the second council member to represent Ward 8, which she did, I'm testing my memory here, from 1976, I believe, might have been 1978, until 1992. And this bill was introduced by council members Tran White and myself, and co-introduced by a number of other council members, introduced on March 29th of this year. The next bill is Bill 24-761, entitled the Overbeck Alley Designation Act of 2022. This legislation would officially designate a portion of the public alley system within square 1009, that's 1009, as Overbeck Alley. Square 1009 is bounded by 12th and 13th Streets Northeast, and doesn't say here, but I believe it's between C and D streets, northeast. And this legislation was introduced by Councilmember Charles Allen on April 18th of this year. The record in this matter will be open until 5 p.m. on July 20th. That's 2 weeks. I believe that's 2 weeks from today. So those who wish to supplement their comments or those who wish to submit comments have 2 weeks to do so. An official naming is a more formal and rigorous process of, that the council requires, including community support. And because it involves addresses, we do this official designations sparingly. If it involves a street, we do it sparingly and make sure that that there's little or no opposition to it. Let me turn to my colleague. I see Councilmember Charles Allen is here, and I'm not sure, there might be another council member present. Councilmember Gray. Let me turn to Councilmember Allen, then Councilmember Gray. You have opening statements.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that, and thank you for holding this hearing today. I know you have quite a number of naming and designations to get through today, so thank you for doing that. I guess I'll start with what I think is some happy news, relatively easier news. And that is, of course, the Noma neighborhood in Ward 6 will soon have another park, which we're proposing to call Swampoodle Terrace, right across the street from Swampoodle Park. I know that I've made creating public spaces for our neighborhoods a very high priority of my time on the council, and I'm really glad to be able to work with the Noma BID and the Noma Parks Foundation to continue that work. And I'm excited about the new space that's currently, I think, just a couple of months away from being complete. And just like we did with Swampoodle Park on the other side of the street, having the designation and the naming of Swampoodle Terrace to make it official is going to be exciting and create a really dynamic set of public spaces there. Now I think on to the more frustrating part of the hearing today. I know the committee of the whole will consider 2 bills to officially designate unnamed alleys in Ward 6 with developable lots, as well as legislation to officially designate streets and alleys in other wards. And while the Zoning Commission made it easier to build in alleys in 2016, the council is still in the position of having to approve legislation one at a time for every alley before development can start. Alley development increases density and generally creates more affordable housing, all in line with the mayor's housing goals. But DCRA will not issue construction permits until the council names each alley. I think this is inconsistent with the plain language of the Code of Municipal Regulations, but it's held up development. And more importantly, it puts the council in the position of a de facto reviewing of development projects that should be able to move forward by right. I think it also puts our ANCs and neighbors in a very tenuous spot. In the past, I've urged the Office of Planning and DDOT to proactively identify unnamed alleys with developable lots and create a process to name those alleys. The current process of property owners petitioning my office and the ANCs for permission to build is inefficient and is not the intent of the public space naming process. And because much of Ward 6 is in the old city, I think we are especially impacted by this barrier to development and creation of new housing. I plan to renew that request at today's hearing, and I hope to have support from the rest of my colleagues. I believe that we'll be hearing some concerns, though, today from neighbors about one of the alley namings, specifically the Overbeck Alley. And for those neighbors, I do want to make sure I'm clear about my own process and what's before us. I appreciate their concerns, and I look forward to hearing more about them as they express them. But I also want to be clear that my process for introducing legislation on namings is that I first ask the impacted ANC to weigh in formally in support of a naming. That was done in this case. As I understand it, the lots to be developed on this alley do not require any zoning relief or changes, and they're matter of right projects. So what I hope to hear today is to really understand if the concerns are about the alley name itself, or if there are more general concerns related to construction of these new homes on those alley lots that admittedly is separate from an alley naming. Mr. Chairman, I have a markup at 11 o'clock, so I will have to step away around 11 o'clock for a markup with Councilor McDuffie, but plan to be here for as much as I can throughout the day. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Gray, do you have an opening statement?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I was very happy to introduce the Kenilworth Courts Street Designation Act of 2021 to officially and posthumously name two public streets in the Kenilworth community of Ward 7 after two noteworthy Kenilworth residents, Amin Muslim and Denise Stanley. First of all, I knew Amin Muslim personally. In the mid 2000s, Amin, a returning citizen, worked as a telemarketer and then parlayed his communication skills, which were phenomenal, into a community resource specialist position at the Edgewood Brookland Family Support Collaborative. Through the next 5 years, throughout that time period, Amin helped shape DC Parks and Recreation's boxing under the STARS program and the Department of Employment Services Workforce Development Program Project Empowerment. He also served 2 terms on the Commission on Reentry and Returning Citizens Affairs when I was the mayor. At the time of his passing, boy, that was a tough situation for me personally to be able to handle. But at the time of his passing in 2019, Amin had served nearly 3 years as a supervisory community outreach coordinator with the Metropolitan Police Department, which is a mentoring program. Amin's Angels, as they were called, was named in his honor. In addition to that, the late Denise Stanley, who passed away in May of 2018, was the Kenilworth Courts resident council president for over 10 years and was a resident of the community for over 40 years. 40 years, that's such a long time. What a great star she was during that entire period of the work that she did. She ran programs focused on seniors and children, including a back to school backpack giveaway, a summer meals program, a Mother's Day luncheon, and a Christmas toy giveaway. She was honored at the 2016 Ward 7 Women of Excellence Awards Program. These streets are part of the redevelopment of the Kenilworth Courts residential community and the DC Housing Authority Development Partners effort. The Warrenton Group, which is headed by Warren Williams, a good friend of mine who we worked closely with on so many things, including this. The Warrenton Group and Michael's Development Company also were instrumental in helping us be able to get to this point. I look forward to the hearing today, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to successfully pass this legislation. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak on behalf of both of these sterling people. I'm just sorry that they are not here because they passed away. But if they were, they probably are somewhere looking down upon us. And I'm delighted to be able to speak on both of their behalf, Denise Stanley and Amin Muslim. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. Both you, Councilmember Gray, and Councilmember Allen, if you wish me to include your remarks or a portion of them in the committee reports, please provide a copy of your remarks. I'm particularly interested in what you, Councilmember Gray, said about the two individuals, and Councilmember Allen, I'm particularly interested in your statement with regard to a DCRA and this process, which becomes a substitute for development review. So if you wish us to include them, please give us copies. I'm going to call witnesses in the order of bills. And I want to note that if we don't have witnesses or testimony, we may not move forward with those bills for markup this fall. I probably should also note, although the record closes in 2 weeks, it's our intent that we will be working on these bills over the summer so that we can move them in the fall when the council comes back on September 15th. The first bill is Bill 24-417, Teresa Howe Jones Way Designation Act. There was no witness, member of the public who signed up to testify. Let me just double check whether there is anybody who wishes to testify on this. If there is, if you could indicate hand raise. And I'm not seeing anyone, so I'm going to move to the second bill, which is 24-422.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to speak on behalf of Teresa Jones. She was an absolute icon. She worked so hard on behalf of her community, and she deserves whatever accolades we may accord her today, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to tell you how much I think of Teresa. She was a wonderful person. I worked closely with her, and I'm just sorry that she's not here to be a part of the accolades that are being extended to her at this point. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So the next bill is Bill 24-422, Torres Straightway Designation Act. I don't believe there's anybody here. I want to note we were contacted by one of the embassies that they are going to submit a letter. I do have some questions for them, which creates a bit of a problem here because it appears that although this designation is symbolic, it appears that they are particularly interested in the naming to facilitate access for delivery drivers, couriers, emergency vehicles, and law enforcement. And that would require an official naming. So we'll need to clarify that. The next bill is Bill 24-427, River Rock Court Designation Act of 2021. We have Haley Hong, who signed up to testify, and I believe was the initiator of this.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. So my name is Haley Huang. I am a resident and property owner of 210 Rear 10th Street Southeast, Washington, D.C. 2003, which is a single family home located in and only accessible through the alley to be officially named River Rock Court by the River Rock Court Designation Act of 2021. As the initiator of the alley naming proposal, I am testifying in favor of Bill 24-427. Our alley needs an official name. My husband and I purchased and moved into our new alley home on June 19th, 2020. Very soon after, we realized that our mail was being delivered into our neighbor's house at 210 10th Street Southeast instead of ours. We visited the USPS hub in charge of our area to explain that even though our addresses look similar, 210 Rear was a single-family home completely unaffiliated with the house at 210 10th. What we were told was very concerning, that they couldn't find our house because it didn't exist on a named street. As events unfolded, it became apparent that every service that relies on GPS, UPS, FedEx, taxi deliveries, and most importantly, EMS, was unable to locate our house. To resolve these issues for us and all the other alley residents, we were told that the alley needed an official name. Our community has been extremely supportive throughout the name selection process. Around January of 2021, we started talking with our neighbors who were very concerned about our situation. From there, the community started discussing the idea of naming the alley. We reached out to the entire square with the Name Our Alley initiative through emails and letters on February 16th of 2021. Our community pulled together a list of 22 potential names, which were continuously shared with everyone on the block via letters and emails. The first round of name voting ran from April 10th, 2021 through May 8th, 2021. We received a total of 44 votes out of the 65 households who resided in and/or owned property abutting the alley. Since no name received a majority of the votes, we moved on to a second round of voting with the top 6 names. And the second round of voting ran from July 17th, 2021 through August 15th. And we received 42 votes out of the 65 households. River Rock Court was the winning name. The name River Rock Court won because of how meaningful it is to our community. For anyone who has not visited our block, the alley entrance off of 10th Street is paved with historic rocks from the 1800s. Around 7 years ago, when the city was renovating the alley, members of the community advocated for, petitioned the city, and ultimately saved the rocks from being paved over in cement. Therefore, not only does the name commemorate a unique characteristic of our alley, but also the unity of the community who came together to save a bit of history. After the community decided on a name, my husband and I moved forward with the legal requirements. We received much support throughout the process from our ANC, Steve Holtzman, for whom we are very thankful. Per law 9-204.21, we needed to submit to the ANC letters of petition in support of the proposal that had been signed by a majority of the owners of property and households occupying property that abuts the portion of the alley or street proposed to be designated with an official name. So as of September 20th, 2021, 43 out of the 65 abutting households and property owners signed the River Rock Court naming petition, which is attached to the written testimony as Appendix A, which is a clear majority. The Ward 6 ANC heard and endorsed our alley naming proposal during the ANC 6B Transportation Committee meeting on September 8th, 2021, and the proposal became Bill 24-427 on October 8th, 2021. To complete the legal requirements of the law sections B, E, and G, my husband and I posted notices of this hearing on all the alley entrances and sent out registered letters with the hearing notice to all residents and property owners abutting the alley, and an official plat was also provided. So in conclusion, the community has worked long and hard to name our alley River Rock Court. To improve the lives of those who call the alley our home, we ask that the council please sign Bill 24-427 into law. Thank you.
Thank you. Give me just a second.
Mhm.
Thank you for your testimony. And I have to say, it's very thorough, and I appreciate all the steps you've gone through, although probably it was a bit of a hassle for you, but I appreciate that you did that. We do not have a copy of your statement, so if you could provide that. And you referred to an appendix, which was the petition, if you could provide that.
Yes, I emailed cow@dccouncil.us, I believe, with that testimony. It was in PDF format, 42 pages. Maybe it got blocked because of how long it was.
Try it again. DC Council with 2 C's, DCCOUNCIL.
Yeah.
.us. Although we are changing to .gov. Councilman Morale, we'll be discussing that next week. But we're still .us for the moment. If you could resend that, and you could CC Evan Cash, that would be eCash at dccouncil.us.
Okay, I will try again. So let me write that down. Cash at
dccouncil.us.
council. Okay. Was it? Wait.
That was one E, eCash. I'm saying that because I heard you say E twice.
Oh,
Tell me again, or say more about River Rock.
so the name River Rock Court was chosen by the community because it represents the community effort. So, what I was told, so I was not here at the time, was around 7 years ago. The back alley was basically unpaved, and the city was going to pave everything over. I used to have historic rocks there from the 1800s. They were going to pave the entire thing over with cement and lose that character that was part of the alley. So then our neighbors got together, a good number of them got together to save some of those rocks, and those rocks were all moved. What could be salvaged was moved over to that entranceway on the west side, coming in from 10th.
They demoed the concrete.
Yeah, so they actually had to come in and rip, they had already paved everything, and then they actually came in and ripped up the concrete just to save that historical part of the alley. So I'm not sure exactly how everything sort of evolved for them, but I understand it was a very difficult community effort that saved that historical part of the alley.
So only the portion of the alley off of 10th Street has these rocks.
Yes,
And the rocks aren't original to that part of the alley, but they are original to the alley.
yes, exactly.
And I think I drove on that recently.
They
what
call
it's
it our
worth.
natural speed bumps because we also had concerns from our neighbors who about people speeding through our alley, and we were told that we couldn't get any speed limit signs or speed bumps because we always have kids playing in the alley there. They couldn't put them in because it didn't have an official name. It wasn't an official alley, officially named street. So we're hoping that all of this helps those efforts by them as well to get those signs in and speed bumps and things like that, traffic control.
And the rocks we know came from the river, or that's just sort of folklore?
That's what they told us.
Yeah, the people who were working on the project told us that they came from the river, and they were specifically and officially called by the experts River Rock, because we went through a couple iterations where they were saying, is it supposed to be Riverstone? Yeah, I think originally people were saying Riverstone, but then we were corrected and told that it was specifically River Rock Court, spelled exactly like that. River Rock spelled exactly like that.
Now, the intention is that the entire alley system will be named River Rock Court.
I believe so, yes.
So that would be, I believe, the two entrances off of C, and there's an entrance off of 10th that cuts through all the way to 11th Street. And then if C Street is on the south, the alley doesn't connect with Independence, but goes in that direction.
Correct. So it has 4 entrances, two on one on 10th, one on 11th, 2 on C, and none on Independence.
Yeah. And then you live on the alley.
Yes.
And what's your address again, if you don't mind saying?
Or 210 rear 10th Street Southeast. We can also be found as 210 10th Street Southeast rear, depending on the documentation. We live at the dead end of the alley, so towards Independence. And there is one other official alley house here as well, tax lot, independent tax lot. And they are 211 rear 11th Street Southeast.
What were they again? 211 rear,
11th Street Southeast.
but you're 10th Street.
Yes, we are directly across from each other. So I look out my window and they're right there on the other side of the alley. And our official address is 210 rear 10th Street Southeast, and theirs is 211 rear 11th Street Southeast.
Okay. You mentioned that more than a majority, it sounded like close to 2/3.
Yeah.
Signed the petition, which
Yeah.
you'll provide to us, and supported the name. Was there any opposition?
There was no opposition to the name River Rock Court, but there was other preferred names that other people were vehemently against. So we did not want to go forward with a name that anybody had a vehement issue with. So that's why River Rock Court was the one. Nobody had an issue with it.
Um, What about with regard to officially naming? Is there any opposition to that?
No.
And maybe this would come from Councilmember Allen. We need a copy of the ANC resolution. Councilmember Allen, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I believe we had put that ANC resolution in earlier, but we can make sure we follow up with the staff to make sure we've got that. Ms. Wong, thank you very much for your testimony. I know I was reviewing back through our emails and last summer working on this. So I think we introduced this in October of last year. So I'm glad that we've got to the point of the hearing now and then hopefully get this moving forward. Just so that we kind of like build this out a little bit. So because other issues are going to be related to lots that face onto an alley that need a naming from a construction or a development standpoint. That's not the case here. As I look through the alley, I don't think there's any lots that are like future development. It's really more about having a designation for your space. And then I think really probably the space across the street are really probably the only two that are going to be impacted here from a male perspective, things like that. How does it work currently, just to kind of help explain this, where you've got utilities, you've got other things. How do they recognize your address currently? And have you encountered any problems with that so far?
Yeah, so internet had our issues as well when we were trying to hook it up. They couldn't find us. Oftentimes, people store us as 210 10th Street Southeast rear because that's the only way they can do it. So they believe that we are an apartment. And so that they always knock on 210 10th Street and they're like, well, she gets confused. And there's always been issues around services in general, recognizing who we are and where we are.
Okay. So you're really contingent on having a really good relationship with that neighbor so that when they knock on the door, they come around to you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, she has done like so much for us. Like I said, the mail gets delivered into her house. So she has to physically be there to pick it up and bring it over to us.
Yeah.
She's done that for a long time now. And she always calls me, you have a package and things like that. So she's been wonderful to us here.
That's great.
It's not fair. It's really not fair to her.
That's wonderful to hear. Not surprised. We're all good neighbors. You referenced it, and I just, to make sure it's clear, because I do want people to make sure they understand around the name selection process. And I think you did a great job of explaining why ultimately River Rock was the selection. And I have no idea if those are the actual River Rocks or not, but to the best of our knowledge, that makes sense and is accurate. I did get an email from somebody who I think had talked about one of the previous names that I think, if I understand correctly, some of the neighbors did not support, and as you said, kind of opposed it. I don't fully understand what the opposition was about, but there was essentially the Furies Collective, which has a historical record there, and I think it is a very important part of our city's history. Was that the name that people objected to?
Yes. I feel a little awkward talking about in detail why they were opposed to it. It had to do with the structure of the word itself. It didn't have anything to do with any meaning behind it. That's right. I can say.
Nope, and I'm not. Yeah, I'm not trying to put you in a spot to have to say why other people were concerned. As we look at this, Listen, I think River Rock Court is a perfectly acceptable name, and there's a direct connection you can make to the rocks there. I also don't think there is anything wrong with the Furies Collective and recognizing its role, especially within our LGBT community. And I don't think that was why the opposition was there. I think it was confusion over other things, but I do think that that's just an important part, I guess, the overall conversation here. At the end of the day, since you're the one making the petition here, you don't actually really care what the final name is. You just want to get your mail. You just want to have an address, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think that's helpful to make sure that we know what the ultimate goal here is. I don't know what else to really say about the neighbors that were confused about what the historic nature of the Furies Collective is and its role in our city, or how they could conflate that with something completely different. So I just think it's important that we kind of put that out there as part of this. Listen, at the end of the day, I want you guys to have an address. I want you to be able to know that you've got, your mail can get delivered, that emergency medical services knows exactly where to go, that you can have your address entered into our CAD system so that, if you've got a medical emergency, there's no delays in terms of getting somebody to get to you to get help. So that to me at the end of the day is our goal here, is to make sure that that gets done. So I don't have any further questions, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a pretty straightforward naming piece. I think it's clearly got the support from the ANC, clearly got support from the neighbors. Maybe there's a little controversy over exactly which name ultimately gets selected, but I don't think there's any question this is the right thing to do to move it forward and get this name so that we can get this resolved for our neighbors in the alley, which will no longer be an alley, it'll be a court. So thank you, Ms. Wong, to you and your neighbors for the work here. And Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. So let me just kind of double check on the support for this. Ms. Wong, I heard you testify that River Rock won on the second ballot, so to speak, and that the vote was something like 44 out of 65 property owners supported it. Did I get that right?
No, slightly wrong. So the controversy was, well, so I left off a couple of steps in our process. So it got a little long in terms of the 4 minutes. So I'll be happy to explain now. So there was a step in the process where property owners were supposed to come forward and eliminate names off of the original 22 names that was on the list, anything that people were vehemently against. At the time, nobody came forward to eliminate Fury's Court, which was the name that Councilmember Allen was referring to. I believe because it had such symbolic value for the LGBTQ community, people didn't want to speak up. So at the end of the second ballot, it was actually Fury's Court that won by one vote, and by one plural vote. Was it a majority vote?
Multiple choice.
Yeah, it was. We did a plural vote. It won by one vote over River Rock Court in the end. And so we had originally released Fury's Court as the winner. And at that point, neighbors, many neighbors, it wasn't just a few, many neighbors came forward with the same concern about the structure of the word itself, nothing to do with the meaning of the Furies Collective. And at that point, we were told that if there was any vehement opposition, that it could stand in the way of the official naming. So we spoke with everyone on the block and explained what happened, that it was supposed to be removed from that process the step before. When we gave the opportunity for people to speak up and remove names, it wasn't. And now we have to retroactively remove it because there were so many people who disliked it for that reason. And so that's why River Rock Court ended up being the winner. It wasn't the majority winner in the second ballot, but it wasn't the winner in the second round of voting, which is why there's now I think all this controversy about what exactly the name should be. But we ended up selecting River Rock Court because nobody was vehemently against it.
And having selected River Rock Court, overwhelmingly folks in the block are, I'll say, satisfied, if not supportive.
Yes, exactly. And that's how we got the number of signatures that we did on the petition.
And the petition, which I don't have, says specifically River Rock?
Yes, specifically it says River Rock, and that was 43 out of the 65 abutting households and property owners who signed that.
Okay. Let me just see if I have any other questions. I don't. You'll resend, if you haven't already, your testimony with the attachments.
Can I resend it now, and can you let me know if you do not receive it, because I'm worried about the size of it.
And then somebody needs to get us the ANC resolution.
It's too large. I can work with her after the hearing to get it.
Right.
It's too large to email. I can work with her after the hearing.
Yeah, we can work with you after the hearing to get it.
Okay, I just sent it off. So please let me know if you don't receive it in the next minute or so.
I guess this is probably too large.
Yeah, we're guessing it might be too large. It hasn't come through.
Okay, I will remove the plat from it. I believe the plat adds a good amount of size to it as well, because I believe you already have a copy of the plat. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to move on to the next bill. So, but Mr. Cash will work with you.
Okay.
So that we get copies. Thank you for your testimony. And with that, I'm going to move to the next bill. So you're excused. The next bill is Bill 24-436, and I understand that there are 6 witnesses. And I'll call them all at the same time. Christopher Cohen, who's an associate attorney at Holland and Knight, Silas Grant, John Main, Dorothy Douglas, who's the ANC Commissioner for ANC 7003. I'm guessing this is within that SMD. Cornelia Mack, and Carol Smith, who's listed as the former president of the Kenilworth Residential Council.
Lila Baddies is here with.
And I'm told that Lila Batiste is here.
Oh, hold on. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. I
But you
can't see you.
cannot see me. Okay, well, I'm gonna just, because let me see if I can change. Okay, there you
Oh
go.
my goodness, there you are.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson and Councilmember Gray, also Councilmember Allen. For the record, my name is Lila Batiste with the law firm of Holland and Knight. I'm joined by my colleague Chris Cohen, and we represent Kenilworth Revitalization 1 JV LLC. This is an entity that is comprised of the Warrenton Group and Michael's Development Company, who are the development partners with the DC Housing Authority on the Kenilworth Courts project. I'd like to provide some brief remarks in support of the bill, Kenilworth Court Street Designation Act of 2021. This legislation seeks to name 2 newly constructed public streets in Square 5116 and Ward 7. The first street runs east and west between 45th Street Northeast and Kenilworth Avenue and would be named Amin Muslim Street. The second street runs north and south, parallel to 45th Street Northeast and Kenilworth Avenue, and would be named Denise Stanley Street. And Councilmember Gray spoke earlier to why these persons are deserving of this street naming and the recognition. By way of background, the land for the streets was dedicated as part of the PUD and related zoning map amendment approved by the Zoning Commission pursuant to Zoning Commission Order number 15-21. The council accepted the dedication of the streets in January of 2021 pursuant to DC Act 23-584. The PUD will facilitate the redevelopment of the 14-acre Kenilworth Courts residential community, which is controlled by the DC Housing Authority. Overall, the approved PUD will provide up to 530 residential units, including public housing replacement units, tax credit rental units, and market rate units for rent and sale. Notably, the majority of the approved housing units will be affordable. The first phase of this redevelopment is currently under construction and will provide up to 166 new residential units ranging from 1 to 5 bedrooms. The first phase also involves approximately 3,000 square feet of non-residential uses, which include a grocer, food co-op, or fresh food use. To date, we are unaware of any objections to the proposed street namings. The passage of the street naming legislation is time sensitive because until the streets are named, the subdivision plat for the phase 1 property cannot be finalized and recorded. As such, we respectfully urge your support for the timely passage of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Batiste. And I assume Christopher Cohen, who's with you, doesn't have separate testimony.
He does not.
Silas Grant?
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, Council Member Gray, and I believe Councilmember Allen is also on as well. I am submitting testimony in support of Bill 24-436. which would designate one of the streets between 45th Street Northeast and Kenilworth Avenue in Ward 7 as Amin Muslim Street. Amin's legacy in the city as a connector reigns supreme. There are very few people who have ever been able to connect others and communicate effectively with everyone in the fashion that the late, great Amin Muslim did. It is fitting that his legacy is being upheld with the street renaming. While one block on one street doesn't represent a significant impact in the grand scheme of things, take out one block and you will see how much more difficult it is to navigate an area. Using directions to get to your destination requires following each step to a T. One missing step can leave you completely lost. Despite how insignificant you may see each step being analyzed alone, together those steps are powerful. Amin looked at his life as if he were that one street in a series of streets that would be driven on in the process to getting to a destination. He never saw himself as an overly important individual, but he played his role diligently because he knew that standing on guard and being in position to help, just as a street sign does, gave so many Washingtonians direction. Amin was my mentor. He was an admirable man that fundamentally improved my life with his wisdom and sage advice. Currently, I work on the council. A part of my work involves interacting with thousands of residents. Until this day, I have not seen anyone duplicate the effectiveness of constituent service-related work to mirror or come close to the approach that Amin had. Much of my work is informed by what I observed from Amin as he loved on every person he engaged with. He was the ultimate connector. He was a connector to resources, people, and ideas. Many thanks to the members of the council who are supporting this effort to honor his life. Peace and blessings to his family, and may the legacy of Amin Muslim live on forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grant, we don't have a copy of your statement.
I will be submitting that today.
Okay, thank you. And is John Main here? I do not see him. Dorothy Douglas? If Mr. Main is in the waiting room, we'll admit him. But Ms. Douglas, Commissioner Douglas, why don't you proceed?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm
Yes.
on the edge of my seat.
Congratulations, Mr. Chairman, for
Thank you.
you winning the seat too. Glad to have you here. And I want to say good morning to everybody, and especially to my Councilman Vincent Gray, and all the members that are sitting here before me, and also Mr. Allen, Councilman Allen. I just want to say this is a great, great opportunity for all the two parties that are actually being honored as we speak today. But they've been honored such a long time that a lot of folks really don't know the wonderful things Amin and Mr. Denise Stanley has done for our community. And I know what Councilman Vincent Gray, Amin worked with the also C. Sosa, and that's one of the things too that should have been included that a lot of folks wasn't aware. Him and Mr. Jordan and Mr. U.G. Brown, which they had right on Sheriff Road. So there's a lot of passion and love and care in here. And I think Mr. Gant expressed it. And I think also Mrs. Battles expressed it, and Mr. Warren Oates as well, the Warrington Group. It's so much blossom and love and blessings that they have already said about these two wonderful persons that it's an honor to be here to represent them and have the streets named on their behalf. I just had a little thing that I wanted to say. And I wanted to say that we've gone a long time getting this process done. And I want to thank Mr. Warrington Group, because we've met with the ANC commissioners, which we voted on it with the benefit agreement about the two streets, which has been an ongoing process as well. Also with the with the understanding of the other persons too that should be involved in having this matter addressed. I just want to read shortly. As a single member district represent the property that includes the Kenilworth Courts Plan Unit Development, which is the Pope. I am pleased to offer my support for the proposed official naming of the two newly created streets within development. The first street runs east and west between 45th Street Northeast and also Kenilworth Avenue would be named Muslim Street. And then the second street would be named Denise Stanley. And also, I think that Ms. Batter has already expressed all those concerns. The land for the streets, which Mrs. Batter has also spoke on those areas, and not through the Department of Housing. I just want to say I'm so happy and so grateful to Councilman Vincent Gray, and we kept pushing this and working together with the community and also with the ANCs, which we voted on, and thank the mayor for and Councilman Gray allowing us to get the money to have this process to happen. And I just want to say thank you very much. And if anything else that you need me to say or whatever, I would appreciate it. I know there's a lot I want to say, but the time is probably a little shorter than for me to express all the wonderful things that have been going on with Denise Stanley. And one thing I want to say about Denise Stanley, she was a cook. And so not only did she do so much that you would think that she was your second parent or grandparent. And whatever you needed from her, she was always there, and also for our youth. So I just wanted to let you know that she was a loving person, a caring person, and a passion. And she was very fussy when it came to her family, and Kenilworth was her family as well as mine. Thank you very, very much. This is Commissioner Douglas. Thank you. 7003.
Thank you, Commissioner Douglas. I'll have a couple questions for you when we're done with the other witnesses. Cornelia Mack,
They're in the attendee room. They need to click the button to come in.
Carl Smith. I see Carl Smith here. I'm told that Cornelia Mack may be in the attendee room and John Main may be in the attendee room. They have to click whatever they have to click in order to be admitted. While we're waiting, Carl Smith, do you want to proceed?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Kenilworth Courts community, my name is Carl Smith, a resident of Kenilworth Courts. I was the previous resident council president and worked under Ms. Stanley and assisted Mr. Muslim, which was my god brother. They were basically my mentors as far as coming up in the community and doing what needs to be done in the Kenilworth Courts community.
Mm-hmm.
Stanley basically was mentored under Miss Kimmy Gray, which I was also mentored under. So anyone knowing Miss Kimmy Gray, she didn't play when it came to Kenilworth Courts. She was stern, and she made sure Kenilworth Courts had what they needed. Miss Denise was the same way. Anything dealing with the kids and the seniors, and I was her in between with the teens. If she had a problem or a situation with the teens, she said, Mr. Q, you go out there and take care of that. I mean, was the same. Any crime, anything happened in the community, I mean, would call me 12 o'clock at night to ask me to go check on it. And I know, I mean, all my life, his kids, he's always been a hardworking person. He was under Alexander. He would always in check and see if there's anything that we could do to work with the youth in our community. Like I say, he was under, I think a few of them we sent under Project Empowerment, and they came out, very well, got jobs, got training. And every time I would see, I mean, he would stop me. You know how your uncle would stop you and give you some words of acknowledgement. I was like, oh, here I go again. I mean, would always give you some word of encouragement and acknowledgement to spread to other people. Miss Denise was like my big sister, so she always mentored me. And every time I was ready to give up, she was like, She said, you can't give up on our community. And that's how she was. Even though she was sick, she would never show it. And she was always there. And she said, if I leave, she said, I'm gonna leave this for you to take over. So I just want to piggyback, and I thank Vincent Gray for his words, very good words on both parts. And I just thank everyone for, and Ms. Douglas for allowing us to do this thing for the community and the families of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I don't know if your remarks were written, but if they were, if you could submit them to us.
Yeah, I will send them.
Be very helpful. Cornelia Mack.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
To everyone. I really don't have a lot to say. And the biggest thing that I have to say really is to thank each and every one that has worked toward getting my sister, Denise Stanley, her street sign. And I just want to thank all of the accolades, all of the kind words, all of the blessings that you all have showed and have said about my sister. Just thank you, thank you, thank you. And God bless all of y'all. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you want to put any of that in writing, please do. Mr. Grant, we got a copy of your statement. I have a couple of
Hello.
questions. Ms. Mack, if you could mute yourself. Thank you. Ms. Douglas, the ANC voted a resolution in support of the naming or in support of the project or both?
Both.
Okay, and I don't know if we have a copy of the ANC resolution in support of the naming?
No, we voted in general for the benefit agreement. But resolution that we all supported that at a special meeting, also in all the meetings that we've done for the street naming. So, but it was in a benefit agreement. But we will get the resolution, and I'll give you that information and send it to you.
Okay, that would be helpful. And I think I said earlier, we didn't have a copy of your statement. If you could submit that as well.
I thought I could call myself sending it yesterday to Mr. Case, Chase, what is it, Case? Cash, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll resend it again and let him check it. So I apologize. That's our sending. Yeah,
He's sitting here with me, busy on the computer.
I know he is. But thank you so much.
I had one other question. This is for anybody or everybody. Normally, when we name a street, an official name, we use only the last name of the person. So I'm just looking like Douglas Street. I'm sure there was a first name for whoever the Douglas is, and Coral Street, a first name. Here, what's being proposed is both the first and last names. Is there a problem if we just use the last name? Anybody want to speak to that? Ms. Baptiste, why don't we start with you?
I don't know really the protocol for street naming, so I don't have a preference one way or another. I would leave that to council members' office or the members of the community to weigh in.
Okay, I do want to note that with our process, there'll be a committee report. It's clear who we're talking about. We're talking about Stanley Street or Muslim Street.
I just handed it to you today.
Commissioner Douglas?
Oh, yes, I think that's the protocol is the last name. So I'm sure Stanley would be great. And I'm sure Mrs. Mack would appreciate that as well.
No.
You don't want Stanley, so what would you like to have out there?
Well, I'll tell you the truth, if I'm not mistaken, off of Southern Avenue, on the DC side, there is a street called named Stanley. So I'm not sure about that.
Oh, okay. So what's your preference then, dear? Because you brought it to us, so we want you to roll it out. We want what you want. So
right now, I'm not sure because I didn't know that they did not do both names. I was hoping Denise Stanley, but Stanley is already taken off Southern Avenue. That's why I spoke up about it.
But can I say this? You have Douglas over there in Kenilworth and you have Douglas downtown. So I just want to let you know.
Well, now see, you didn't gave me something I didn't know.
Yes.
But I'm fine with it.
Okay, thank you. I just want to share it with you.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas.
You're welcome as always. And God bless you.
Any other comment?
Chairman, the only caveat that I would offer specific to Amin Muslim is given that his last name is Muslim, I would wonder if that would cause confusion on who it's connected to, an individual or an entire faith. So that's the only caveat that I would offer as to why Amin Muslim may be a more suitable name for it than just his last name.
Okay, these comments are all helpful. I'm making a note.
Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Gray.
Mr. Chairman, I think in both instances that having the full name of these individuals is very appropriate. In my comments earlier, I wanted to make sure that I identified each one of them by their full name. And I think we should, in the street naming, we should follow that as much as we possibly can. Amin Muslim and Denise Stanley. Those are distinctive names that I think need to be observed with the process that we're going through. I think what was said a little earlier by, I guess, was Carl Smith. I want to underscore what he said, and that is we don't want to have redundancy with any of these names, and we want to make sure that these two individuals, especially given the contributions that they made to the community and the people who live in those communities, we want to have them as distinctively named as we possibly can. I know we have Kimmy Gray Court, right?
Yeah.
We ought to try to follow that model for this street naming, Mr. Chairman. For both.
Although I will note, council member, that if you look at the names of our streets that are named after people, overwhelmingly, it's only the last name.
Yeah, well, Kimmy Gray, of course, is a distinctive name. And there's the court named for her. I just think we should follow the same model, Mr. Chairman. That's my position at this point, and I hope that you would work with us to try to make sure that these namings are. I mean, these people were named; their names are so well known in the community. I just don't want to have any confusion about who they were, why the streets have been named the way they are. So I just want to underscore that I just think that, not to have redundancy, we ought to work hard. We ought to work hard to make sure that these streets are named for them individually in Amin Muslim and Denise Stanley.
And Councilman Gray, if you can hear me, I truly agree with you because this is what we all voted on, to have the streets names after what you just said.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
To piggyback off both of y'all, I think it'll be an honor and for our kids to look up in this community and see that somebody that they know and respected have a street name after them.
That's right.
That they can look forward to and to see, read up upon and talk about.
Absolutely.
That's something historical.
It is historic. Absolutely right. To have a street named Amin Muslim and have one named Denise Stanley, that is precisely what we need to make sure that our children have as role models to continue to understand, and especially in our communities. I mean, we worked hard to bring housing to these communities. That they worked hard to bring housing to these communities, and we need to make sure now they are properly recognized with the full street name in each one of these instances.
And there are streets with two names, and also, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, also Councilman Gray, there are names with two names, name on the street, especially if they're on 14th around there. Where you all at now on Pennsylvania Avenue? I think you all named the street. I can't think of the person's name, but his name and first name and last name is up there too. So it has been done.
Yep, we're trying to work now, Commissioner Stanley, around Alan Liu, who was a great guy, and we're trying to name a street for him now. So I know that those who are part of the architecture for that will want to see whatever's done. We named Alan Liu Street. And certainly Denise Stanley Street, Amin Muslim Street. No, those names need to be intact, Mr. Chairman. I don't think any abbreviation or attenuation of these street names, none of that should happen. We just need to be diligent to make sure that the street names are as they are, the people's names are.
Mr. Gray, Councilman Gray, and Mr. Chairman, I want to say real quickly. I know you all talked about Ms. Jones. Was that Teresa Jones? Yes, I just want to say, I'm going to speak on her behalf. I've been knowing her for over 40 years, so I know the wonderful things that she has done, and she's one of the pioneers and trailblazers, just as Denise Stanley and I mean Muslims are. So I just wanted to say, and you all need, matter of fact, her daughter still lives today. Even in her wheelchair, she visits the neighborhood in Ward 8. So which I was also a member of Ward 8 in Valley Green back in the days. But she was another great pioneer as well. So she deserved her name also to be named as one of the things that she's done for her community.
I agree with you, Ms. Douglas. I agree with you.
I'm going to move on. We're now talking about other bills. So I do not have any other questions. Let me just check with staff. Mr. Gray, did you have any questions?
No, I didn't, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to be redundant, but I do want to make the point again about being able to ensure that their full names are intact in doing the street naming, like Amin Muslim and Denise Stanley. They deserve it. So I'm being redundant, Mr. Chairman. I understand that, so I apologize for that. But that's just the right way to do it.
Okay. If you had no other questions, I want to thank all the witnesses here. And those of you who, who didn't give us statements, if you could give us copies, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair.
Statements. And I'm going to move to the next bill, which is Bill 24-528, W. Cardell Shelton Way Designation Act. And we have no witnesses who signed up for this. So I'm going to move to the next bill. Swampoodle Terrace. Actually, because Council Member Allen said that he had to step away for a little bit, I think if there's no objection, because Mr. Hoagland is on board, I think I'll go to the next bill and then come back to this when Councilmember Allen joins us. So let's go to Bill 24-736, Wilhelmina and Calvin Rolark Way Symbolic Street Designation Act of 2022. We have two witnesses, Lafayette Barnes and Denise Rolark Barnes.
Separately.
Do you want to proceed?
We're here. I'm sorry. Morning,
I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for you.
Oh my God, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
As you know, I'm Lafayette Barnes, a long-term Ward 8.
All right, we're having transmission problems. After about your fifth word, we lost you. You're totally frozen. I'm going to suggest that maybe what you should do is exit and log in again. So while we're waiting, here's the deal. I skipped Swampoodle Terrace in the hopes that Councilmember Allen, who said he had a markup at 11, will come back. I moved on to Wilhelmina and Calvin Rolark Way. And the two witnesses, Lafayette Barnes and Denise Rolak Barnes, I believe are on the same link which froze. So I believe they signed out and they're, I'm hopeful, trying to log back in. And so we're pausing. Mr. Barnes, I see you again. Let's try again.
Thank you, sir. So I'm presenting written testimony in support of Bill 24-736 to symbolically designate the 500 block of Foxhall Place Southeast and Square 6126 in Ward 8 as Wilhelmina and Calvin Rollark Way Southeast. As you know, Chairman Mendelson, Calvin and Wilhelmina were proud residents of Ward 8 who lived at 524 Foxhall Place Southeast for over 30 years. I want to thank Councilmember Trayon White of Ward 8 and certainly you, Chairman Mendelson, and other members of the committee for support of this legislation. This is my second opportunity since December 2017 to testify before the Committee of the Whole in support of such legislation to recognize the tremendous contributions made by the former Ward 8 council member, Wilhelmina J. Rollark, and her husband, Dr. Calvin W. Rollark, to improve the quality of life in the District of Columbia and especially the underserved in Ward 8. And by the way, Councilmember Rollark served on the council from 1977 to 1993. I just thought you'd want to hear that. At this time, many district residents do not know the Rollark's long history of public service to meet unmet needs of Black folks in the district, the nation, and internationally. It is incumbent on all decent Washingtonians to promote public spaces that educate our community, especially the youth, about the Rollarks and other distinguished African-American trailblazers. 1 second.
Oh, shoot.
I'm sorry. Here we go. The public needs to know that Wilhelmina served for 16 years on the DC City Council, during which she chaired the Committee on Employment and Economic Development. She led efforts to establish cable TV and offered its services first to Ward 8 residents. She also chaired the Judiciary Committee, where she passed legislation to reform the district sentencing guidelines, and especially those affecting our youth. The public needs to know that Calvin and Wilhelmina were a powerful couple, a powerful team who founded the United Black Fund of Greater Washington, which hosted the annual United Black Fund Victory Luncheon, a who's who for Lottie, Dottie, and everybody, as Calvin would say. They also hosted the annual Martin Luther King Jr. Parade, the annual Black History Invitational Swim Meet, and the I Love Life and I Want to Live campaign. The Rollarks also established the renowned Washington Informer newspaper, which publishes positive weekly news about the African-American community for over 55 years. The passage of Bill 24-736, the Wilhelmina and Calvin Rollark Way Symbolic Street Designation Act of 2022, will help to educate and memorialize the distinguished legacy of the Rollarks, and more importantly, inspire other Washingtonians to move forward, pick up the banner of economic and social justice to move the district onward and upward until victory is won. Again, I stand before you to urge the Committee of the Whole to pass Bill 24-736 in honor of the Rollarks' many contributions to the District of Columbia. This concludes my written testimony before you, Chairman Mendelson, and other members of the Committee of the Whole. I'm available to answer questions that you might have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Denise Rollark Barnes?
I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councilmember, Chairman Mendelson. How are you? And good morning also to Councilmember Gray. Oops, where am I? That's my head. Councilmember Gray and Councilmember Allen. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for this opportunity to testify before you regarding Bill the bill to rename, to ceremonially or symbolically rename Foxhall Place Southeast after the 500 block of Foxhall Place Southeast after Calvin and Wilhelmina Rolark, my dad and stepmother. I have decided, Councilmember Mendelson, I've submitted written testimony. It pretty much outlines a lot of the details that Lafayette just read to you a few minutes ago. It's a reflection of that testimony. So I won't necessarily read my testimony again. But I will say that, as Lafayette mentioned earlier, we are coming back to you again, this time for a different resolution or bill. Before we were trying to officially change the name, of course, I think you've mentioned it earlier, and I think it does impact the residents on Foxhall Place to ensure that they do not have to change their addresses, but this will be a symbolic recognition, which I think would have been of probably even more than my father and stepmother would have even hoped for. It's been a long time. As you know, my dad died in 1994. My stepmother died in 2006. And so as you know, time goes on, as Lafayette mentioned, there is less known about the work that they did in this community, as well as nationally and internationally. And, you know, it's important for us, and I think that is the aim of this bill, to make sure that we can remember those who gave so much of their lives to this community. So there's a whole lot that could be said about the Rolarks. I think we could spend an hour or so reading or talking about the contributions that they've made. And that's the idea, one, to sort of let the community know or feel proud to have had them as neighbors, and how much that they really did love living on Foxhall Place. I often ask them, you know, why did they continue to stay there? And it's because they loved Foxhall, they loved their neighbors, they loved being in Ward 8, and they thought it was important to continue the relationship that they had there and to do the work that was needed in that community and to grow as individuals themselves. So I will stop there, except also to state that Teresa Jones was a great friend of the Rolarks. They worked hand in hand on a lot of community events and really tried to do a lot to make a difference politically in Ward 8 and in DC as well, because they both were real supporters of home rule, statehood, the issues that we're still fighting for, as well as Cardell Shelton, who we know was a real advocate for minority contractors, left quite an impression on people because of his stance or the stances that he took as it related to making sure that minority contractors would be given equal opportunities in the DC area. So having said that, Councilmember Chairman Mendelson, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. I also want to say thank you to Councilmember Trayon White for introducing this as a symbolic bill, renaming, because we really appreciate and his support here as well.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and Mr. Burns, for yours as well.
Our pleasure.
I will say for the record, I'm disappointed that this is not an official naming. That was the legislation I proposed a few years ago. Wilhelmina Rolark was a council member, as has been noted, but also really did some things that I think folks don't appreciate today, and there are two that come to mind. Our current mayor likes to talk about the cadet program for police and fire, how important that is. A lot of folks have seen how important the cadet program is. It takes our high school youth, who are not only youth looking for work when they get older, but also DC residents, and gives them a pathway into the sworn service, whether it's firefighters or I should say fire and EMS or MPD. Well, Wilhelmina Rolark's the one who created that program. I hear this controversy all the time across the country about the fact that we penalize poverty by requiring money bail. Somebody who is arrested who's low income can't afford the bail. They may be no greater risk to the community than somebody who's wealthy who can't afford the bail. We're one of the few jurisdictions that doesn't have money bail, and we haven't had money bail for decades, and that's because of Wilhelmina Rollard. There's other legislation she did that's important, but I chaired judiciary for 8 years, and I constantly came across those two issues as issues where they were not only good for the city, but in terms of the money bail, or rather the doing away with money bail, we were a trailblazer for the country. And that's to her credit. So just wanted to note that. I do not have any questions for either of you. I will, although maybe I will ask us, do we know if the ANC took a position?
I'm not aware. No, I don't.
Okay.
I know they took a position, well, formally, as you may remember, they were opposed to having the official, but they did support verbally a ceremonial name, but I don't think they've taken a position that I'm aware of.
Chairman Mendelson, I know in working with Councilmember Trayon White's office and his Chief of Staff, Ms. Lockridge, we haven't been informed of any opposition or positions that the ANC has taken regarding this bill.
Okay. I do not have any other questions for you on this. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let me see where we are. I'm going to pause for a second. Why don't we go to back to Swampoodle Terrace designation, and we have one witness, Daniel Hoagland, who's the Chief of Staff for the NOMA bid.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Wonderful. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, Council Members Gray and Allen, if you're still on. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Daniel Hoagland, and I am the Chief of Staff for the NOMA Business Improvement District. I'm here today to testify in support of Bill B24-0722, the Swampoodle Terrace Designation Act of 2022. This bill, introduced by Councilmember Charles Allen, would officially designate the new DC Park currently under construction in NOMA on lots 800 and 807 in Square 748, bounded to the south by L Street Northeast and to the east by 3rd Street Northeast as Swampoodle Terrace. The NOMA bid, along with our nonprofit affiliate, the NOMA Parks Foundation, are proud of the successful public-private partnership formed between our organizations and the DC government to establish permanent public outdoor spaces in NOMA that are attractive, sustainable, and welcoming places for people to refresh, play, and connect, now and for generations to come. This new park at the corner of 3rd and L Streets Northeast will be the 5th public park to open in NOMA as a direct result of this partnership. Judging by the strong level of community engagement in the process to select a permanent name for this new park, this space will be eagerly welcomed by the neighborhood. In total, nearly 900 people participated in the community voting process organized by the NOMA Parks Foundation this past winter and included 2 rounds of community voting. Round 1 yielded more than 200 potential names, with a strong consensus emerging around just 3: Swampoodle Terrace, Union Garden Park, and Tiber Creek Park. These top 3 options were then put to a second round of community voting, and Swampoodle Terrace won handily by more than 20% margin. Those who submitted the name Swampoodle Terrace or variations thereof commented that they appreciated the continuity with Swampoodle Park, which sits directly across L Street from the new park. The name Swampoodle is itself an artifact of the neighborhood's history, deriving from swamp puddle, and comes from the Irish immigrants who lived in the neighborhood during the 19th century. This park's design repeats many elements of its neighboring park, Swampoodle Park, and is similar in overall size. It includes a special feature, a beautiful terraced garden for rest and relaxation. As always, the NOMA bid is grateful to all the members of the NOMA community who participated in the community naming process. We concur with the community's choice of Swampoodle Terrace, and we believe the park will provide a great place for all district residents and community members to gather and enjoy time outdoors with their NOMA neighbors. We'd like to especially thank Councilmember Allen for his support of this effort to deliver more green space to the NOMA neighborhood. This concludes my written testimony before the committee. I'm available to answer any questions you might have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. You're the only witness, so we're going to now hit you with the questions. So can you say more or provide us in writing more history about the name Swampoodle? You touched on it briefly in your testimony.
Certainly. I'll tell you what little I know, and we can certainly provide additional information as background. So the neighborhood that existed in the same location for NOMA was characterized by being a working class neighborhood, laborers on the railroads, and who helped to build various places around DC in the 19th century, largely Irish immigrants. At the time, there was a stream, a tributary of the Potomac called Tiber Creek that ran north-south through the space and connected, I believe, actually into the Anacostia, maybe not the Potomac. But in any case, it created a very marshy general sense of the neighborhood, and people took to that, and the name Swampoodle derived from the word swamp and puddle, as I said, which is definitely evocative of how it felt to live there. And so the neighborhood became known as Swampoodle until its demolition, which I believe was to make way for the Union Station rail yard. I don't know when exactly that happened.
Okay. You discussed the selection process. I'm a little bit confused with the name Terrace because I think of Terrace as a street.
I think the official name is going to be Swampoodle Terrace Park, and the space itself is terraced as a tiered garden. I can share actually the designs with you as well. From the ground level, I think there's two distinct tiers of garden space that go up to the top space, which will be slightly removed from traffic and the street level, and will include lots of seating and a little sort of almost amphitheater type space at the top.
How much height are we talking about? 30, 40 feet or?
No,
50
no. 15, 20 feet.
Above
the
the street.
Yeah, that's the natural grade of the space.
And you're referring to this in the future tense as in the park is still under construction?
It is, yes. Groundbreaking was in March or possibly April, and the projected completion is this fall, September or October.
When this fall?
September or October, likely on the later side.
So, double check. Give me just a second. So the legislation refers to the name being Swampoodle Terrace, but I heard you say Swampoodle Terrace Park.
I have Swampoodle Terrace Park in my testimony. I'll have to double check on where the distinction is.
Yeah, I think that would help a little bit.
Okay.
Because as I said, I think of terrace as a street. We'll see what Councilmember Allen says. I've already been shot down by one council member today. Councilmember Allen, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to try to shoot you down. If I do so, it'd be very gentle. Be very gentle. First off, thank you, Mr. Hoagland, for the testimony. I know that, and I apologize, maybe you mentioned this already, but I know Rodney Jasper was submitting written testimony as well for the record. Just specifically to the name terrace, while I do agree with the chairman, I sometimes hear the framing of terrace referring to a different street. I can think of a couple of examples. In this case, I think the community really focused on the terrace because of the terracing of the space. So the Swampoodle Park across the street, where we have the dog park and the not Valhalla. What do we call it?
It's a Walhalla.
Valhalla is a very different thing. That's a Norse space I go, I guess, once you die in battle. So the Walhalla, very different. So then the Swampoodle Terrace, which I think is really going to be a fantastic accompaniment across the street, will really be, I think that most people view it from a naming perspective, to the chairman's question around terrace, is because it has a terraced effect, is exactly why people focused on that. And it does follow, for folks that are familiar with space, it follows the grade of the land, which already just kind of slopes down, but will have that space. I think it's also going to be great because when I talk with the neighbors, it's the kind of the missing piece of that park. So by having, for folks that have got their four-legged friends, they have a really great dog park in that space. For folks, and I've brought my kids over there to climb up and down the Walhalla, and they absolutely love it constantly. They have that space, and then having this additional open green space, I think really helps build out the complement of those green spaces. My hunch is people are going to colloquially just kind of refer to it as Swampoodle Park, but the terrace will be its very defined space. And I think it's important that we've got the naming that takes place. So I'm excited about it coming online in the fall. I know no one ever wants to give us a date, because then you're going to miss the date and we get angry. But it's sometime in the fall. Let's kind of call it October, because that's just what it's going to likely be. But it's going to be a really great addition to the space. If we need any more information about the history of Swampoodle, we can certainly dig deep and talk about exactly how you outlined it. Tiber Creek that used to run through that space. Then Tiber Creek was put underground, basically under North Capitol Street, because it essentially, every time that the Tiber Creek would overflow, which was frequent, you'd end up with that kind of swampy, puddly area, which then got colloquially called the Swampoodle area. But so we've got dry land there now, and a lot of great spaces. So having that, I think, is a great addition. But from the standpoint of the committee report, if the committee of the whole needs any additional help, Mr. Chairman and staff, just let us know. We're happy to make sure we get that history that's included in there. We can probably borrow from some of the Swampoodle Park history that was also included in that committee report for that element there. I guess I don't have any further questions at this point. I mean, this one to me makes sense. We would expect to have, just like across the street, DPR signage that goes on the space. The NOMA bid and the Parks Foundation would be helping do the maintenance and kind of keep an eye on making sure we're doing the upkeep of all of it, kind of the way it works across the street. But anything else, Mr. Hoagland, that you wanted to add?
No, thank you. You hit all the high points. It will be turned over to DPR upon completion. We'll be entering into an operations agreement with that agency to manage some of the maintenance and operational needs for the park. And our on-the-ground team of ambassadors will be there multiple times a day, making sure that it is looking great and continues to be a community amenity we can all be proud of.
Excellent. Actually, one quick question on that. Does the district give you any type of extra compensation to the bid to do just that regular maintenance, or that's part of just what the bid does?
On the parks specifically, I don't believe we have a reimbursable agreement. I think that's subject to a different conversation. We have a reimbursable maintenance agreement with DDOT for specific public space work that we do throughout NOMA. But on the parks, I don't think there's a similar agreement in place.
Right, just because the city's the one that put the funding in for the Parks Foundation to build the budget or to build the parks. So after we build it and we put the money in for that, you help maintain it. And I think NOMA bid does a great job of helping maintain those spaces, as well as Alethea Tanner, which you guys don't get paid by the district. That's in Ward 5. Just kind of, you guys don't get paid for that. That's something that just the bid programs. You guys do movie nights and constant activation there too, right?
That's correct. We have a very effective operating agreement with DPR there. They waive all the permitting fees for our events, which is fantastic partnership with them on that park. But the maintenance is not included in that.
Right. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. I do want to note, I think one of you said that Robin Eve Casper will be submitting comments or testimony, and I was told by staff that the Department of Parks and Recreation, for some reason, didn't figure out how to get here today, but will be submitting a statement. So we'll look forward to that. That's going to conclude this bill, and I'm going to move to the next one.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Hoagland. The next bill is Bill 24-761, Overbeck Alley Designation Act of 2022. And I have 9 witnesses listed, so I'm going to call them all in. Jack Becker, who was the co-initiator. Aldolfo Brasino, Annie Parashika, Declan Cochran, Callum Cochran, Margaret Cochran, Kelly Garamone or Garamoni, I'm guessing Garamone, apologies, Jean Waskow, and Lisa Page.
Comments if they're there, need to click the button to get in.
If the Cochrans are present in what we call the waiting room, please acknowledge or click whatever you have to so we can admit you to testify. Mr. Becker, why don't you begin?
I'm not on mute. People can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Okay, my apologies. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Jack Becker. I'm a Ward 8 resident of 9 years, architect and co-initiator of the Overbeck Alley naming proposal introduced by Charles Allen's office as Bill 24-761. I'm here today to testify in my support of the passage of this bill. My fiance Maddie and I own a vacant lot which abuts the alley to be named and on which we plan to build a home for ourselves. For practical purposes, a new residence requires a named alley in order to obtain an official address, and in our research, we determined that a fitting namesake would be the late Ruth Ann Overbeck, a longtime Capitol Hill resident, local historian, and activist. Ruth Ann Overbeck arrived in Capitol Hill in 1968 from her native Texas, and prior to her untimely death in the year 2000, assembled a vast inventory of oral histories, photographs, and other documentation today housed at GW's Gelman Library, with the hope of completing a definitive history of the Capitol Hill neighborhood. Ruth Ann was the first chair of the team with which researched, defined, and nominated the Capitol Hill Historic District to the National Register. It was in her honor that in 2001, the Capitol Hill Community Foundation created the Ruth Ann Overbeck Capitol Hill History Project, which through the ongoing participation of nearly 150 volunteers, has continued to preserve and publicize the living history of the Capitol Hill community. In addition to a solid majority of those residents and property owners who abut the alley to be named, the proposal has the support of her widower, Robert Hughes, who also lives in Capitol Hill, as well as the steering committee of the Ruth Ann Overbeck Capitol Hill Community Foundation. In enduring tribute to her life and impact, I support the proposed Overbeck Alley designation. I would add that since obtaining a unanimous resolution from ANC 6A in support of this naming, we've held 3 voluntary in-person community meetings to better understand concerns of the larger resident population around the proposed alley naming. As will surely be gleaned from the testimony that follows, we learn that to the extent that opposition to this naming exists, it comes from a resistance to the development of these 2 alley lots. This observation is demonstrated by the fact that no homeowners have brought forth any alternative names in any of the 3 meetings that we held, nor in any subsequent communication. That being said, in conversations with Chris Leskowski, Charles Allen's legislative director, we understand that the upcoming markup period permits substitution of our proposed namesake. While we obviously think Ruth Ann Overbeck is a worthy candidate, if consensus around an alternative name can be established, we would support a substitution in the interest of assuaging community apprehension. We've diligently followed the alley naming process in close consultation with our local ANC and Charles Allen's office, and feel that the current procedure, as echoed by Charles in his opening remarks, sets up the regrettable impression that by right development is subject to a veto by surrounding homeowners. In our opinion, this has created needless hostility between us and our future neighbors and has prevented us from having more productive conversations around issues that are important to all of us, including traffic safety, parking access, and construction concern. While there's no evidence that naming an alley will encourage speeding or exacerbate traffic, we would support traffic calming measures such as speed bumps and speed limit signage, which have been implemented in other public alleys in DC. Several neighbors have raised the issue of apps such as Waze and Google Maps directing traffic through named alleys. In our research, we determined that public alleys, named or not, are excluded from GPS directions. After all, when is the last time any of you have been directed through one of Capitol Hill's many named alleyways while navigating the city? Lastly, we believe that having two residential structures clarify the width of the presently undefined and amorphous 15-foot wide alley will very likely mitigate rather than worsen whatever reckless driving presently occurs in this alleyway. In conclusion, we hope this body will support the naming of this public alley in honor of Ruth Ann Overbeck's legacy and contributions. I'm available to answer whatever questions you might have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. I have a copy of your statement.
I
but,
added a little bit after submitting that.
Would you be willing to submit the revised statement?
Of course, of course.
Thank you. I'll have some questions for you, but let me turn to the other witnesses. Is Mr. Brasino here? Adolfo Brasino?
You're on mute, Adolfo.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Good morning, Chairman Person, Mr. Anderson. My name is Adolfo Briceño. I am a contractor, co-initiator of the Overbeck Alley naming proposal. I met Ruth Ann Overbeck in 1988 while I was still working for Mr. Bob Hammer and John Pagonis, who used to do renovations and restorations in the Capitol Hill area. I have been doing this work for many years, and I know the Capitol Hill very well. I've been there since the beginning of renovations and restorations in the area. Initially, I had bought a property on 12th Street, which is the historic part of the area. And I did the restoration, and I noticed that there were going to be issues trying to restore the property and be able to sell it, because the building across the street from my house was built vacant, and the building next to it, it was a drug distribution area. And that is where I reached out to a friend who used to be a realtor for Barbara Hill City Sites at the time. And he was able to contact the owners of the building. Eventually I ended up buying the building. And with that building came the area where we are thinking about creating new houses for Jack and myself. I live in Ward 1 in an old building that I restored 20 years ago. And I would like to live in the Capitol Hill area because I have worked there for many years. My kids are grown up and they have their own families and they do their own thing. So I would like to be able to have this dream come true, having a residence in the Capitol Hill area. When I bought the building had many issues. The backyard used to be an area where people used to steal cars and use the area to dump. Hello, can you hear me?
I can. I was getting distracted looking at the plat, and I think the plat has a mistake on it.
Okay.
Please continue.
Well, I ended up buying the building. As I was saying, the building had a lot of issues and a lot of problems. The alley was a mess. And the area where we were thinking about doing a house used to be a garden that was leased to the community for $1 a year. Unfortunately, the people that was using the area as a garden neglected it. So it became a dumping place for everybody that used to work in the Capitol Hill area. And since I was the owner, I had the responsibility to clean up and to call the police to have cars that were stolen and set on fire in the area. I have spent lots of time cleaning up the area, and I know the area is a nice place to live because of all the work that I have done there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Brusino. We don't have a copy of your written statement. If you could provide that,
I will do so.
thank you. Is Annie Perez?
Perez Chica. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Please proceed.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. It may seem strange to you all to see so much time and attention spent on an alley, but this isn't just an alley. It's more a gathering spot of a neighborhood. I have lived on this block and in this neighborhood for almost 20 years. So I too have worked tirelessly on cleaning up this alley and making sure it remains safe. When lots of people we know started leaving the city for bigger houses because of crime or housing prices or school choices, we stayed because of this neighborhood and the people in it. We love it here, and this alley is one of the reasons we love this neighborhood. People say to us all the time, well, you have that great alley. Isn't it funny what people who live in a city think is great? Well, we do, and it is. I oppose the current naming of the alley for several reasons, but my main reasons are as follows. The petition. The way in which the petition for the alley was collected, in my opinion, was flawed, short-sighted, and did not take into account all the neighbors who would truly be affected. This petition required a majority support of 51 affected neighbors. 5 out of 12 said yes to the naming. The developers were both a yes. One house was counted as 2 votes. Both the tenant and the owner received separate votes. Not sure why. They would be the only people to get 2, but they did. And the final yes was a neighbor who reached out and is asked to be removed and counted as a no. The others were NA or a no from me and my husband. 1. This majority of support seems thin and one-sided to me at best. I personally feel the ANC was lax in their process and rubber stamped this without giving much consideration to the matter. I've been told over and over again that the letter of the law was followed in this process by both my ANC representative and Mr. Allen's office. While the letter of the law may have been followed, the spirit of the law, ensuring community support, was absolutely not followed. The petition to name should have been presented to everyone affected. This extends far wider than just the properties adjacent to the alley. Adjacent to the alley. The entire block and adjacent blocks use this alley as a common meeting spot, playground, dog run, trash and recycling area, back garage, and parking entrance, and pedestrian walkway. Few of these people were asked for their opinion. Instead, the petition was approved after being signed by very few. 2 actual houses, in fact. The ANC representatives of the neighborhood, in my opinion, in my opinion, this did not happen to the degree it should have, and I have let my representatives know this. The name. The process for the naming of this alley started with 2 people who had been neighbors and community members for about 10 minutes. Mr. Becker took it upon himself to imagine the people who have lived in the neighborhood for years needed him to come in and pick a name for us. Mr. Becker and his partner didn't come to our doors asking if we had any thoughts or ideas about the names for our own alley, a block I've lived on for almost 20 years. He just assumed he had figured it all out for me. Perhaps he imagined we might be grateful for him coming in and taking over. We are not, and I am not. At one of our community meetings, our neighbor, Mr. Mel Garner, explained to Mr. Becker that the name didn't resonate with any of us. Mr. Garner then explained he had lived on the block since 1946, and his father went to school in the neighborhood since the 1920s. Wouldn't it have been neighborly to have asked Mr. Garner if he had any thoughts on his own neighborhood? In my opinion, this approach was very presumptuous. I'm a little shocked our new neighbors wouldn't think to consult anyone on the block. Perhaps a better way to become a true member of the community might be to consult or involve those of us who created the desirable community this petitioner wants to be a part of. During one of our community meetings, Mr. Becker told those of us assembled he would change the name if we would agree to the name of the alley so he can build his home. If Mr. Becker doesn't care enough about this name, I don't think the rest of us should either. Public safety. Many people walk through this alley, neighbors, kids, dogs. The community uses this alley, believe it or not, as a community hub. Have safety studies been done about what this alley naming might mean for traffic? Will this increase traffic? Will Waze mark this as a street and give directions to make it a cut through? Given the number of people that pass the alley entrances at any time, including school children, this can be a dangerous situation we are setting up. Cars already drive way too quickly through this alley, and there are too many near collisions. Will the naming of the alley and creating of a street make this more dangerous to pedestrians? Finally, in learning about Miss Overbeck, she was no doubt a great woman with many accomplishments. Among her many achievements, I was impressed she was a founder of the Local Preservation Trust, which works to preserve historic facades and was active in the efforts to preserve historic homes on the Hill. I wonder what she would have fallen on alley development, and wonder how she would have felt that her namesake alley is the home of bamboo and cork housing in this historic neighborhood. In my reading, she seemed like a very community-oriented person. It's a shame that this alley naming has now made her great name the subject of such contentious debate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Parashika. Did I get that right?
Yep, exactly.
You seem to add a little bit at the end of your statement.
I did it late last night. We were on vacation, so I wanted to be thorough. So I did. I added another paragraph. I'd be happy to resubmit.
That would be great if you did.
Of course.
Thank you. Are any of the Cochrans here?
Yes, they're listening for Tom.
Me.
All right, why don't you all proceed, however many of you there are?
2.
Okay.
Speak loudly.
I know. My name is Declan Cochran. I am 9 years old, and I just finished the 4th grade at Capitol Hill Montessori at Logan. I live across the street from the alley, and I know some of you think I'm just a kid, and the alley naming doesn't affect me, and I don't really know what's happening. But I know what's happening. Me and my best friend play in the alley every day from once we get home from school to dinner. If you rename the alley, and renaming the alley is the first step to building houses in the alley, cars will start coming down the alley more often than they already do. This will be more dangerous for kids like me and my best friend. This is why I'm asking you, please do not support the petition to name the alley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. And who's next?
I am.
Hi, my name is Margaret Cochran. I'm 12 years old, and I'm a rising 8th grader at the CCC. We should have had better notice before people just come in and build a house. And if the alley has to have a name, the people who have lived here should get to name it. I've lived on D Street Northeast for my entire life, and I use this alley almost every day. Our whole neighborhood uses this alley. We throw parties, play games, and a lot of other things. If we name this alley, cars will start coming down the alley, and that's dangerous. People could get hit. In addition, while I know this bill is only to name the alley, we all know that that is the first step to construction in the alley. Not only will this be inconvenient, loud, and dirty, but the people who will benefit from the construction will not live through all these problems. You should not support naming this alley. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have listed Callum Cochran.
Yes, Chairman. Sorry, this is Todd, the father. He's not going to participate today. Just two. We're all done here in the Cochran household. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it, both of you.
Okay, thank you. Is Kelly Garamone here?
Yes, hello, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Kelly Garamone. I live at 1233D, and we've been here since 2006. I feel like I'll be echoing what my neighbors have said, but this block between D and C, bordered by 13th, particularly at this end, with the alley space in between, is a vibrant, tight-knit community that has been built with effort and conscious, consistent tending. We have fairly regular get-togethers to welcome new neighbors, say goodbye to ones leaving, celebrate graduates, create safe, family-oriented social events for children of all ages, organize yard sales and impromptu gatherings for adults to chat while kids play under watchful eyes. One of the things I personally love most about living here is that while I work from my home office, I can almost always hear the sounds of children playing outside when school lets out. Call me sentimental, but enabling children to still play outside and use their imaginations and bodies rather than being glued to screens is something precious and worthy of protection. Thus, the naming of the alley system and the subsequent development that will follow has many significant implications for the whole community. In the spirit of looking for win-wins here, I'd like to make the following requests. First, please postpone the naming to allow the neighborhood to research and honor someone who has a relationship to this part of the hill. The notification of this process did not allow sufficient time for us to be able to do that. In fact, I'll add that in hearing the experiences of some other neighbors or other neighborhoods on this meeting, illustrate that acutely of how differently those processes have gone and how much more participation there has been. Second, in recognition of the regular use of the alley by children and community members, we need to take all measures to keep this as safe a route as possible. I would ask that experts in traffic safety be brought in to make recommendations to the neighborhood. These recommendations would include, but not be limited to, speed bumps at the entrances, street signs inset and off D and C so they don't draw attention to casual drivers by who might mistake it for a regular street, and prevention, if needed, of the alley being added to Waze or any other traffic rerouting apps that might redirect traffic to the alley. And then finally, and not insignificantly, in recognition of the significant change in the appearance, privacy, light, and use of space by having two two-story dwellings back there, we would ask for every design consideration to be taken to eliminate or greatly reduce the loss of light and privacy. Everyone bordering these new properties, not just bordering the alley, but the new properties, will have a massive loss of privacy in their rear bedrooms, backyards, and gardens because of windows overlooking what has up till now been private space. We all bought our homes with the belief that living on a busy street was offset with the quiet and seclusion of our backyards. So without careful design, this development could dramatically change the quality of our lives. Thank you for listening and for granting these very reasonable requests.
Thank you. I'm looking at a map. Thank you for your testimony. Is Jean Wasco here? I don't see her.
No, I'm sorry, she wasn't able to join after all.
Lisa Page?
I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Councilmember Allen, I appreciate your time today. I'm here to echo what Annie and Kelly have said. I am also one of the property owners which abuts this alley at 1229 D Street. And to Kelly's point, I do think it's quite astounding to see the difference in community support and effort that this builder has put as compared to the River Rock Court, with 65 households sort of being notified and 43 of them approving them. I do think it is a deeply flawed process when you consider that only the alley, the individual dwellings abutting the alley were consulted when the testimony here, and as Councilmember Allen knows personally, this is a wildly vibrant alley. This is an alley that's known on the block on D Street as Mr. Allen used to pass by with regularity, and I would know, right? This is an alley that is vibrant with individuals, always has children in it, regularly has neighbors gathering. And so the notion that a majority of owners or property owners which abut, including two of the ones who actually own the property itself, would be sufficient, I really do think begs credulity. I was one of the original petition signers. I've since withdrawn my support, in large part because it was not sufficiently clear that, even in my brief conversation with Mr. Becker, that with an alley naming, that was a fait accompli, that there was no further action to be taken, and that there was build by right. And part of the reason I didn't know that is because, as we've already heard, I've lived here for 13 years. There used to be grassy space back there, and Mr. Briseno one day, paved it over and got a stop work order for doing so without, sufficient permitting. And so it does a little bit strain credulity that two, essentially, at the end of the day, individuals who are not otherwise invested in this property could make the decision for an entire community as to what this space will look like going forward. I do think that, much like if a neighbor is going to build a pop-up, you have to get the affected neighbors who will have to have approval with respect to that build and that process. I realize that's not what we're here for, but it speaks to the larger point that you were making earlier, Mr. Allen, that this is a flawed process that doesn't sufficiently take into account the needs of the neighborhood and the landowners and the actual use that is that the community is built toward. So it does really concern me. I'll note just as an aside that you know, I've lived here 13 years. Certainly, Mr. Briseno has been in the neighborhood occasionally, but when he is, it's almost always to tow cars from the back lot, which he owns. And so it's a little concerning to know how this process is going to go moving forward when I'm sure he has done plenty to improve the neighborhood, but to Annie's point, it's the people who have lived here and have lived here for decades and decades on end. We don't have a lot of turnover on this block, and it's because of the community that we've built here. And that community is focused on this alley. So I would request a reconsideration of the timing and the process that's been followed here so that more of the neighborhood, both on C Street and on D Street, could be consulted through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Page. I don't think we have a copy of your statement.
No, sir, I can submit one.
If you would, I appreciate that. So I have a few questions and I'll turn to Councilmember Allen. Mr. Becker. Did I understand, Mr. Becker, you're a co-initiator and Mr. Briseno is a co-introducer?
Yes, no, it's me and my fiance, Maddie.
But Mr. Briseno seems to be taking some credit as well.
He's the owner of an additional abutting vacant lot that he intends to build a single family residence on. But the co-initiator represents myself and fiance Maddie, who together own the second of the two vacant lots.
That own one of the two vacant lots.
Exactly. Maddie and I own one of the vacant lots and Adolfo owns the second vacant lot.
And Mr. Briseno lives in the square as well?
I'll let him answer that. He does not. He owns an apartment building on this square, but in this vacant lot, but does not reside on this block. He resides in Ward 1.
Mr. Briseno?
Yes, sir. I live in Ward 1, 1301 Fairmont Street Northwest, an old building that I restored myself. It's too big for me right now. And the apartment buildings on 12th Street are mine. And I'm the one who has kept that area clean. That area was cleaned up by myself when I bought those buildings on 12th Street. We haven't had problems or anything from the neighbors complaining about the apartment buildings that are annexed to that lot.
So you own two apartment buildings on 12th Street?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Mr. Becker, do you live on the square right now or you just own that vacant lot?
I just own the vacant lot. I live in historic Anacostia, 2126 15th Street Southeast.
There was some testimony criticizing the petition. Can you respond to that?
Sure. The petition, as we understood it in consultation with Charles Allen's office and our ANC, and the letter of the law, which I understand is a point of contention in and of itself, but we understood this letter of the law to mean obtaining support from those residents and property owners who abut that portion of the alley to be named. In this case, the proposed named extents abut, I believe, 12 properties / residents. And so the burden of majority support was therefore, I believe, seven signatures, which is obviously less than the totality of this block, whose property does not abut the proposed extents of this alley naming.
So for example, residents on 12th Street if the houses are on 12th Street, they're not abutting the alley.
They're not abutting the proposed alley to be named. No.
And the alley to be named it's sort of shaped like a cross. But the alley system is more extensive.
Correct. So in conversation with Charles Allen's office and our local ANC, we arrived at this cruciform geometry for a few reasons. One is that the secondary alley segments, you'll notice, taper to 10 feet in width and are not suitable for vehicular traffic. So naming the entire alleyway would confusingly place wayfinding signage at the 12th and 13th Street alley entrances, which is stated aren't safe for vehicular ingress. The second is that these particular extents permit the future orderly by right development of other alley parcels without those property owners having to reinitiate this naming process. Finally, this cruciform section overlaps with the existing water and sewer service that DC Water installed in the early 20th century to serve 4 brick alley row houses, which were subsequently demolished after World War II in the urban renewal era.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that very last, what you said about 4 houses?
Yeah, there had been 4 alley row houses, not unlike the row houses you'd find on Guestford Court or 14th Street Terrace elsewhere in Capitol Hill. And those were behind the existing church at 1230 C Street Northeast. Those 4 alley row houses are why there's DC water and sewer infrastructure in this alleyway. And that DC water, sewer, and water is coextensive with this cruciform plan. So there's a main water and sewer line that goes north-south, and then there's laterals that go east-west.
So I'm looking at the plat, and it almost looks like there are above the cross section, the cross alley, looks like there are 2 rectangles, and I'll say northeast, northwest. I'm probably wrong. Because we're in northeast.
It should say northeast on those 12th and 13th Street.
It does.
Yeah, it says southeast, but should say northeast.
Okay, that's the type of it.
Anyway, it looks like there are 2 rectangles. And then there's a third that is, see, I don't know where north is. Let me think first.
This is due north. This is oriented due north.
The plat.
Yes.
Okay, so there are 2 rectangles north of the cross alley, and there's 1 rectangle that's southwest of the, and so each of those would be a developable lot?
Theoretically, yes. The majority of that northeast rectangle and southwest rectangle are occupied by existing 1-story warehouses. And that's been their improvement and use for the last, I think, century or so. It's been on all of the old Sanborn maps in my research. But theoretically, they could be redeveloped into single family housing. The south east rectangle, I guess it's not clarified as a rectangle, but that's the rear yard of the church. And that would have to undertake a subdivision in order to support alley development. And a subdivision in turn would require a variance due to the zoning regulations and their requirements for alley widths for fire marshal service.
But you don't have that issue with the northeast rectangle.
Correct, because they're existing alley record lots that are of suitable size and dimension. They're existing alley lots. You can't create new alley lots in a block like this without a variance, which would be a very tall order to obtain.
And you said that there are warehouses on the west side.
On the southwest rectangle is entirely a single-story warehouse, and that northeast rectangle is actually 3 properties going north, south in orientation. And we own the westernmost of those 3 parcels that entirely fronts the 15-foot north-south section. Immediately to the east, those 2 parcels are supporting that single-story warehouse. If I could share my screen, it might be more clear, but.
Well, but my question is going to, who owns these warehouses, or what are they warehouses for? I assume they're not the other property owners in the square.
They're owned by a construction family, the Coakleys, and they specialize in light gauge commercial framing and drywall. And my understanding is that these warehouses contain scaffolding that they periodically need for their construction work. And they live out in Virginia, as far as I know, this construction family.
So I know I'm familiar with the name Coakley. So the Coakleys have a warehouse or 2 within this square.
Correct.
Which they use for storage.
Correct.
Is there other property owners who have warehouses there?
Not to my knowledge. There are garages. There are a few garages that I believe front other portions of the alley system, but there are no warehouses on this block besides those 2 owned by the Coakleys.
The ANC, has the ANC taken a position?
They've unanimously supported the naming and have a resolution to that effect that I've sent to Evan Cash.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Councilmember Allen, and then I may have some more. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And thank you all for coming to testify. And I know this has been the subject of a lot of conversations, and I know several meetings as well. So first off, I appreciate everybody taking the time off. And I think a few people are even on vacation that are chiming in and setting aside time. So thank you for making sure you did that. A couple of questions, I guess. Well, the way that I'm looking at this, I kind of break this down into 4 categories of issues, some of which may be easily resolved, some of which may have no resolution. I preface that with what I kind of said in my opening statement, which is that the lack of DCRA, that process puts and pits ANC, neighbors, council into these positions and scenarios. And so that is incredibly unfortunate and frustrating because I see very many people that I recognize and know that are fantastic and phenomenal neighbors and all care deeply about this community. And so we're in this space where we're struggling with something here. I kind of view this, as I mentioned, in 4 different spaces. 1 is the name itself. 2 is the process of how we got here. 3rd is issues of how do we make sure we maintain and create a safe space, whether you're young or old or whomever you're going to be using spaces. And then 4th is the use of a space. I'm hoping the first one we can all just kind of knock out and not that big of a deal. I don't think anybody's going to disparage Ruth Ann Overbeck. I think we all recognize this is somebody who we hold in high esteem, and we would be love to name things after somebody who's played such a big role in our community. So I realize there may be some issues around what should the actual name be, but it's not an issue of is this or is this not a worthy name. And so I hope we can kind of put that one off to the side here. And I think we all agree there. Second's on process. So I do think this is one where I'm hearing neighbors kind of talk about the process of the overall piece. Now, again, from my process of introducing legislation, I turn to my ANC. When my ANC puts forward something and then moves it forward and asks me to introduce a naming, then that's what I do. That's the process I have followed for years. And that's the process that we follow here. Within that process, though, unlike, for example, a couple hours ago when we were talking about River Rock Court or whatever we named it there, which was the entire alleyway part, this was looking at a portion of the alley, which, I mean, to be fair, lower the denominator of number of signatures that were needed rather than looking at the entire system itself. I think that's where we're going to, I think that's fair game that people are going to criticize that process and what that looked like. Third issue is around safety. I appreciate the concern around making sure we don't have folks that are going to cut through. It's going to somehow induce drivers to drive through the alley. I will say representing a ward that has a whole bunch of named alleys. I have never seen that to be the case. So I take seriously those concerns around safety. I think DDOT should be putting speed humps in alleys. I think we should be working on how we help maintain that space and keep slow speeds. But I have not seen that come to pass in other alleys. So I appreciate that it's a serious concern. I just haven't seen it necessarily. But I think it's a concern that everybody shares. And then the last is going to be on the use. I know this alley. This is a space where families come to gather. I know it's a space where neighbors come and spend time together. So you don't have to convince me that this is a space where, whether it's a kid learning how to ride a bike or families just gathering, it's a space that happens. I would ask, I guess, and Ms. Parashik, I see you have your hand up, so maybe I'll kind of direct this to you, and then to the neighbors, feel free to chime in here. We acknowledge that it is private space, like in terms of the spot that we have here. I just want to make sure we all, this is not like it's a public piece of land. It is privately owned, even though because of the way it's working, people are kind of on that private space to be able to ride a scooter or gather, but that's the space. But help me reconcile, if we have warehouse uses back there, we already have alley structures that have uses in the space. Help me reconcile why you think an alley use of storing construction materials is going to be okay and not disruptive. But if there were to be homes built in the space, it would be disruptive. Because I think when I look at the space, there are structures back there. There are things that happen. So Ms. Parashik, I'll turn to you if you want to start off with that.
I have thoughts, and I know Lisa does too. So thank you for your questions. And I think a couple things. One, while Ruth Ann Overbeck was a lovely person, and I'm sure several neighbors brought up the fact that, great, there's a lot of lovely, wonderful people. And we would have liked the opportunity to look at a name for ourselves. So I do think there is issue with the name itself. So I don't want to gloss over that as number one. And then just to answer your question on the scaffolding company, I thought it was very interesting that the River Rock people, they brought up a very good point. Once they have addresses there, we will have Amazon drivers and UPS drivers and lots of other people. I did hear Mr. Becker say something about ways and wayfinding for the smaller alley, that's the 10-foot alley. We will have more cars come through the alley. They will have to find their houses for any kind of delivery, any kind of Uber drop off, anything like that. So houses will increase in a way that a scaffolding company does not. We have all.
If I can just real fast, that's not what would be happening on River Rock. I just want to make sure that's clear. They already get mail. They have the postal person walks there, the Amazon person walks there. There's not a induced traffic at that dead end area.
But in our case, there would be. Right now, a postal person doesn't deliver to the scaffolding building, an Amazon person doesn't deliver to the scaffolding building, UPS, Waze. Those deliveries aren't being currently made. The two areas in question are empty fields. And you're right that the use of those is private. Where people talk about the alley, they are talking about the street that is a public alley. People can't ride scooters on that block on their parcels. One is grass, one is gravel. So I think that the safety issues are real. It will increase traffic. I know Lisa had an answer too, but that's my answer on increase of traffic.
Okay.
Sure. I think the distinction between the buildings that are currently there and what are proposed for in these two residential lots is twofold. One, the buildings are very lightly used. And so when they are used, it's almost always first thing in the morning, as one would expect. It's construction folks pulling out the scaffolding, almost always 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, where there is almost no foot traffic. There's certainly not, kids gathering. There aren't, community members sort of coming together. So the current usage by the construction company is quite light, first of all. I think the second difference, recognizing that it is private space, is the way that buildings close in what is now wide open space, right? We have the alley between my house and Annie's house, which the kids play in, and they will play handball against the houses and whatnot. And that's, of course, a great use of public alley space. The difference when you get past each of our residences into this broader open space is just that feeling of having wide open space around you, right? So the kids aren't necessarily playing on the gravel lot because it's gravel and often has cars on it. They're not playing on the grass lot because you can't ride scooters or whatever else on it. But it is the feeling of that wide open space between where the other alley intersections, which lead to the other houses on that back up to 13th Street. Like it does create a different feel for kids to be running around, and when the rest of that alley would now essentially be closed in by structures. And that's,
yeah, I don't disagree that. I mean, I got 2 kids that love to run too. So I totally get that in terms of that open space, I guess. But we acknowledge that the argument is, are we saying that no one should be able to build on their private property to maintain that?
I think that the community that exists here wants more input in what that ultimately, in how that happens. And the frustration is that there were almost no one, again, because as you know, this is a widely used alley, the literal understanding of the expectation, which is the 4 structures which abut this particular alley, as opposed to all the structures which abut the land which is about to be developed, is where the real process sort of fail has happened, because it doesn't sufficiently acknowledge the community use of this space.
Okay.
May I add something about the existing structures versus the new ones?
Yeah, I know my time is ticking down, so if you can real fast for me.
Well,
I'll let
our
you
house
go, Mr.
isn't,
Allen.
sorry?
I said I would let Mr. Allen go over.
Oh, thank you. Our home abuts one of these warehouses. We only have maybe about 12 feet or something between our back fence and the warehouse. And it was there when we bought it, so we knew that that was the lay of the land. The difference between that and then a house that will be right next to it, which will then be right, also abutting us on the edge, is that there is nothing on that wall of the warehouse. It's just a wall. So there's still privacy. That's the big thing for all of us who will be abutting the land and abutting the new structures, is the profound lack of privacy in the back. And I know that if we talked with Mr. Becker, I know that there are concerns in terms of access for firefighters and all that. So I understand what the difficulty is, but it also used to be zoned to not have anything higher than 14 feet. And so with the changing of the zoning, that's what's changed the possibility. So, Mr. Becker is a clever designer. I think maybe I'd like him to go back to the drawing board and figure out different ways to design it so that there is less of this loss of privacy. And on top of Mr. Becker's unit too, he's talking also about having gardens and other things that make it even higher than the 20 feet allowed by the code in terms of structure. So it's just going to feel like this big imposing thing that's just going to wipe out light on that side of the house. And we're north facing, so we appreciate the southern exposure we do get in the back.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. I know my time is up here, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Again, let me thank all our neighbors here. I'm looking at faces I see out in the neighborhood, out for a walk at the park. So I know that I've got a group of neighbors that love their neighborhood and work hard to make it a greater and greater place. So I appreciate everybody coming here. I don't have all the answers to how we figure this one out, but I appreciate everybody's time and testimony today. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I don't have any other questions. I have sort of an observation. I was a little confused when I looked at the plat because 2 of the streets say southeast and 2 say northeast, and the southeast streets, I want to say, are sort of exactly where I live. I live on E Street, southeast, between 12th and 13th. So that got me a little confused. But while there was the testimony, I was thinking of some of the alleys that have been named where I am: Gunther's Way, Watkins Alley, Adolph Close Court, Walker Court, for example. And I don't see a lot, and I don't hear a lot of complaints with regard to traffic. I just want to toss that out, which sort of echoes what Councilmember Allen said. in terms of inducing traffic, people wanting to cut through and so forth. We will look at all the testimony. Anybody who wants to supplement their testimony or anybody who is not here but wishes to submit comments, we'll look at all of that. And I will work with Councilmember Allen with regard to how we move forward. With that, I'm going to excuse you all. Again, thank you for your testimony. And I'm now going to turn to the government witness. And the government witness is Dan Emerine. I noted before with regard to the park, that Swampoodle Terrace Park, that we expected Department of Parks and Recreation will be submitting comments. So again, thank you to everybody. Mr. Emerine, you are on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Just a moment, please. Okay, good afternoon again, Chairman Mendelson, members of the council, staff, and district presidents. My name is Dan Emerine, manager of the Policy and Legislative Affairs Division at the District Department of Transportation, or DDOT. I'm here today to present testimony on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser and DDOT Director Everett Lott regarding Bill 24-417, the Teresa Howe Jones Way Designation Act, Bill 24-422, the Torres Strait Way Designation Act, Bill 24-427, the River Rock Court Designation Act, Bill 24-436, the Kenilworth Courts Street Designation Act, Bill 24-528, the W. Cardell Shelton Way Designation Act, Bill 24-736, the Wilhelmina and Calvin Rolark Way Symbolic Street Designation Act, and Bill 24-761, the Overbeck Alley Designation Act. The stated purpose of Bill 24-417 is to symbolically designate the sorry, my testimony says the 4020, that should be the 4000 block of First Place Southwest in Square 6172 in Ward 8 as Teresa Howe Jones Way. For visualization purposes, I have attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map highlighting the relevant block of First Place Southwest. In fiscal terms, the cost of each installed sign for this designation is approximately $190, $65 for sign fabrication, and $125 for sign installation. Sufficient signage requires 2 total signs totaling $380. The stated purpose of Bill 24-422 is to symbolically designate the alleyway between 1601 Massachusetts Avenue Northwest and 1603 Massachusetts Avenue Northwest in Ward 2 as Torres Strait Way. I've attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map highlighting the alleyway between these 2 addresses. Sufficient signage requires 1 sign as the alleyway has only 1 entrance. The stated purpose of Bill 24-427 is to officially designate the public alley system within Square 969, bounded by 10th Street Southeast, Independence Avenue Southeast, 11th Street Southeast, and C Street Southeast in Ward 6 as River Rock Court. For visualization purposes, I've attached to this testimony a copy of the plat of the designated alley. Sufficient signage requires 4 total signs. The stated purpose of Bill 24-436 is to designate the street in Square 5116 between 45th Street Northeast and Kenilworth Avenue Northeast in Ward 7 as Amin Muslim Street, and the street in that same square that connects to Quarles Street Northeast, also in Ward 7 as Denise Stanley Street. For visualization purposes, I've attached to this testimony a copy of the plat of the designated streets. Sufficient signage requires 5 total signs. I'd like to note that as introduced, the bill does not explicitly state whether the designation is symbolic or official, but it's our understanding, and for purposes of this testimony, DDOT's assuming the designation is official and simply recommends that the committee specify the type of designation when the bill goes to markup. The stated purpose of Bill 24-528 is to symbolically designate the 100 block of Upsall Street Southeast and Square 6094 in Ward 8 as W. Cardell Shelton Way. For visualization purposes, I've attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map highlighting the 100 block of Upsall Street Southeast. Sufficient signage requires 2 total signs. The stated purpose of Bill 24-736 is to symbolically designate the 500 block of Foxhall Place Southeast in Square 6126 in Ward 8 as Wilhelmina and Calvin Rolark Way Southeast. For visualization purposes, I've attached to this testimony a copy of the DDOT generated map highlighting the 500 block of Foxhall Place Southeast. Sufficient signage requires 1 sign, as the 500 block of Foxhall Place Southeast only has 1 entrance. The stated purpose of Bill 24-761 is to officially designate a portion of the public alley system within Square 1009, bounded by 12th Street Northeast, D Street Northeast, 13th Street Northeast, and C Street Northeast. Again, I'll note for the record that these streets are all in a quadrant northeast in Ward 6 as Overbeck Alley. There is a labeling error on the plat that we've submitted, and we will ensure that a corrected plat is submitted. I have attached a copy of the plat for visualization purposes. DDOT's understanding is that sufficient signage for the designation would require 2 total signs based on our reading of the legislation as it's drafted and how it would apply to the complex alley network within the square. The portion of the public alley system that's addressed in the bill only has 2 entrances where DDOT would normally post signs, one at the north entrance of the alley and the other at the south entrance of the alley. DDOT is able to absorb the costs of these signs within its current budget and does not foresee any operational impact these designations would have on the district's transportation network. Therefore, the administration has no objection to these designations, and DDOT stands ready to assist the council and all other stakeholders with any ceremonial unveiling activities that may materialize as a result of these bills being passed. This concludes my testimony. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify before you today, and I'm available to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Emerine. I do have a couple of questions. Maybe 3. The Overbeck Alley, is DDOT comfortable with naming only a portion of the alley?
Yeah, we have no objection to that.
For the Kenilworth, the official street naming off of Kenilworth Avenue, there was discussion about full name or last name.
Okay.
Most streets in the city, if they're not a number or a letter, are 1 word. And I'm not doing a very good job of thinking of different names, but there's a Patterson Street, there's a Berry Place, Douglas Street, Douglas Court. Does DDOT care whether it is a full name or not?
I think in this instance, Mr. Chairman, we would defer to the council on your intent. I would note that there are instances where listing out a full name could create a street name that's so long that it wouldn't practically fit on a street sign with the standard fonts that we use, but that does not appear to be an issue in this instance. So we don't have any concerns.
Yeah, as you said that, and this is arguing against myself, but I'm thinking of Joshua Barney Circle Drive. And no, Admiral Joshua Barney Drive. You know where I'm talking about in Fort Lincoln?
Yeah.
That's a long one.
Yeah,
All right, but what you're saying is that you'll follow the council member.
that's correct. Oh, and I think it's worth noting, Mr. Chairman, that Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue Southeast does list of course, that person's full name.
Yeah, so there are examples, but all right. Anyway, you gave me your answer. The other question I had, you noted in your statement that the proposed Cardell Shelton Way only requires 2 signs. There are 4 intersections. I'm wrong, 3. So between Second, so there's the Second Street intersection, there's a Homer Place intersection, and then a First Street intersection.
Right. So, well, so typical. So I think, and I'll ask some of the other staff who are following the hearing if they have any additional thoughts. But I think my understanding is, so there would certainly be a sign needed at the intersection of Upsall and Homer Place. We typically post signs where there's existing infrastructure to support signs, right? We're not adding new signposts usually for symbolic names. I don't know if where exactly the existing signposts are. But I think we would probably be posting that sort of triangular intersection of Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue and
First.
The other, yeah, it might only require 1. We can certainly look into that if there's a thought that perhaps an additional sign would be necessary. But in any case, we're talking about 1 or 2 signs at that western side, and we can accommodate either need.
Well, I wasn't thinking multiple signs at first with that large intersection with Martin Luther King. I was thinking of a sign at First, a sign at Second, and a sign at Homer Place.
Sign at First.
That's MLK.
Okay. Yeah, I think that may be one where we'll need to coordinate with our operations team and perhaps also your office and the initiators and just figure out what would work best.
Yeah, and actually one of the questions that we have, which we'll have to check with Councilmember Trayon White, is are we naming the 2 blocks or just from First Street to Homer Place?
This is all the 100.
So there's a little work to be done there. Let me check if I have any other questions. Hold on. I'm remembering that with regard to Overbeck Alley, there was testimony regarding how naming would induce traffic. Since you're representing DDOT, do you have a view of that?
I can't say that I do, Mr. Chairman. We're really, our approach to symbolic and official designations is that we're focused on the naming as such and not other sort of downstream effects.
Sure, but in your experience at DDOT, have you come across anything on one side or the other of the question whether naming an alley would induce traffic?
I can't say that I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I do not have any other questions for you. Our staff will work with you or vice versa. You said something about getting a corrected plat.
Yes.
I don't want to say that that's not important because it is, but we don't need it until we're ready to mark up the bill, which will be after the recess. So
Understood.
just work with us or we'll work with you and we'll get the loose ends
Okay.
taken care of. Thank you, Mr. Emery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's going to take care of this hearing and the testimony. I've said this a couple of times earlier. The record will be open for 2 weeks. Anyone who wishes to submit a statement or to supplement their statement has until 5 p.m. on July 20th. We will be working on these bills during the council's recess, which ends September 15th, and then move thereafter with marking up these different bills. A couple of them we need more information or need to look at, and I haven't decided whether I'll move forward with the bills for which there was not a witness. The time is 12:42 and this public hearing is